Hello students, it's Ms.Boley here. In this video, I'm going to go through the process of making this painting for the color theory composition. So let's get started. Let's review some color theory first. So this is the color wheel, and it is used to organize colors and help artists make decisions around color that will create some type of effect or impact in their artwork. We know that primary colors are red, yellow, and blue, and those are used to mix all of the other colors. Complementary colors are across from each other on the color wheel. Intensity is how bright or dull a color is, and value is how dark or light a color is. So just some review of terms from earlier on. So here we have some complementary colors. So they're just directly across from each other on the color wheel, and they don't have to include only the primary and the secondary colors. They can include the tertiary colors as well. So for example, back on this slide, we could have red, orange, and blue, green together as a complementary set. So here's some examples of complementary color schemes. So in the painting that I'm going to make, I used complementary colors of purple and yellow. And we've got an example here with blue and orange. And then a couple examples of red and green. And we have this Van Gogh piece up at the top here. Definitely he explored tons of different color schemes in his work. So split complementary is when we take the color that's across the color wheel. So in this case, it would be red and green. And then we go on either side of one of the ones that's across. So rather than picking green, we would have yellow green and blue green as our two additional colors in this color scheme. And this is an example of Van Gogh as well, an example from Van Gogh. Here we have an example with the same color scheme, split complementary, from Claude Monet. And then here's a different split complementary color scheme. So we would have orange as our starting color. We go across from orange, we get blue, and then we split onto either side of blue, and we'd get blue violet and blue green as our other two colors. So split complementary is a little bit more complicated, but hopefully you can see how it works. Analogous. So analogous colors are just beside each other on the color wheel, as you can see in this little graphic down at the bottom. We've got some examples, one from Monet, the water lilies, where it's all greens and blues along that side of the color wheel. We have the sunflowers by Van Gogh, where we've got yellows, orange and green. And then we have some warmer colors with this painting of the squash and the cherries, where we have red, orange, yellow. And then finally, our last one that you can explore is monochromatic color scheme. So this example here, famously from Picasso, as he's going through his blue period. So we use just one color, and we can either add black or white to change the value of the color, or we can desaturate it using a complementary color. So with all of our learning in the course this year, we have looked at values quite often. And now we're adding a level of complexity on top when we're now adding color as well. So just a reminder here that color also has value. So if we take an image of the color wheel in black and white, we can see that colors like yellow are quite light and colors like blue are quite dark. And this kind of lends also to learning that we did around tinting strength, right? So these lighter value ones are going to have less impact when they're mixed into a darker color. And this can also be helpful for us when we want to use value in our color work, because rather than using black or white to create value, we can incorporate colors that have darker value or lighter value as well. So for this project, it's up to you what kind of piece you want to make. I chose to do a still life with acrylic paint. You can make something that's abstract or non-representational. You could make something figurative that has the human form featured, or a portrait. You could create a still life like me. You could explore portraiture, or you could look at landscape, or some combination of all of these. So first you need to consider the what, right? And then you need to consider the media. So we need to use color for this project. It is an essential part of the learning outcomes for it. But there's some flexibility in what media you might choose. So make sure that you're planning based on materials that you can get access to, and complete the planning template as well for your composition. Okay, so first thing, so once you kind of decided on the subject matter, then you're going to consider, how does this communicate a concept or idea that's important to me? So maybe you've decided, I'm definitely going to do a landscape. I really enjoyed the project we did earlier with it. How is this going to have an emotional impact in terms of the composition? Are you going to take some photos of a place that's important to you? Are you going to use photos of Are you going to take some photos of a place that's important to you? Are you going to create a landscape of some sort in order to communicate a message? For my piece, I chose to paint a still life with 2 eggs. And the kind of meaning that I was hoping to communicate through that is the day-to-day life that parents experience, and how it can kind of feel very tiring and very dull, just, making a bunch of meals, making a whole bunch of snacks, kind of only existing to meet basic needs. So for myself as a parent, makes that makes a lot of sense for me. It's related to my personal experiences, and I want to communicate that. Then also, though, the 2 eggs in the pan are actually connected and almost shaped like a heart. And so I wanted that feeling of, the drudgery and the exhaustion and the boringness, the ennui, but also that love and the heartwarming side as well. So that's my concept, and that's the emotional impact that I hope people will see when they look at the work, or at least wonder about when they look at the work. And then you need to get specific on what your subject matter is going to be. So is it going to be a still life? What's the objects? What are the objects going to be? Is it going to be a portrait? Who's going to be in the portrait? Is it going to be a forest, a zebra? What is it going to be? And then you're going to want to look for some copyright-free images, or take some images yourself. And when you're taking images, you want to consider, and finding them as well, consider the composition. And then once you've got your subject matter decided, which color scheme will work best for you? Are you going to look at a split complementary, a complementary, analogous, monochromatic? What would work best? So go and create some swatches of the colors using your media. And you could also find some reference images that have those colors. And then the composition is the next step. So how are we going to place the key things in our picture? What arrangement are we using? Is it balanced? Is it visually appealing? I have a video about thumbnail sketches outside of this, but what I wanted to point out here is that I took this reference image just one day when the eggs turned into this heart shape. And I was like, oh, cool. I can maybe do something with that later. But the photo itself, though, is not a good composition. It's kind of boring. It's really dark. It's not a great quality image. But I also am painting on a square uh, panel. So I need to consider how this rectangular, lower quality image is going to translate into painting. So what I first did was I looked at some different reference images from some different viewpoints. Like, what if I zoomed out? What if I went down from the side? What if I cropped, right? So I cropped it so that it was a square, all of these, so I could imagine what they would look like on my painting board. And then I went and I did some thumbnail sketching where I drew a square because that's the shape of my painting surface. And I considered different placement on the surface. So I had the eggs over to the left side, and I have the pan taking up a majority of the space. I have zoomed in with them directly in the middle. I had added the edge of the pan a little bit more prominently. I had turned it like so its composition is mainly over to the right hand side, and then I had it where it was more top heavy. Then like so I tried to explore some different things, and I think ideally what I would do, my I don't think my composition is that great in my final painting. The technique is all right. The color is great, but I feel like the composition could be worked a bit more. And what I feel like ideally I would do is after doing these sketches, I would take some additional photos. So make some more eggs, take some additional photos with really good lighting, and try out all these varieties to get a more effective composition. So then once I have my composition kind of locked in, or I have one that I feel like looks great, then I'm going to do a little bit of a more detailed sketch. And this is how I'm going to consider the ways that I might shade, the ways that I might use texture, the ways that the techniques that I might use, all of these things. So also consider at this point the materials that you're using and how they might impact your composition. So are we using colored pencils? Are we using watercolors? Are you experienced in this media? And if not, you may want to do, some little technique practice, try to shade a sphere, or try to do some blending and layering and put the images in your slide template. So the first step that I want to do is prepare my surface for painting. So I have just a raw canvas board. Normally I would want to paint it maybe with some gesso so that the surface isn't super absorbent. But I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is mix a ground color. So I'm picking a purple that's kind of like a mid value, and I want it to be pretty warm as well. And I'm going to paint this color all over the whole entire background. And this is going to help me to get over the anxiety of just like an empty canvas, but it's also going to give my paint something to stick onto, and it's going to show through in all of the different tones underneath my painting. So it's going to give my painting a warm feel. So that is what I'm doing right now, is mixing a bright purple, reddish purple, and I'm going to paint the whole entire background. Make sure that you mix enough to cover the whole surface. I did not do that, and I had to kind of thin the paint out a little bit, and we want to avoid that because we really want this to be kind of like the foundation for putting all the other layers on. If you're using just paper to paint onto, then the same thing, you'll want to have it kind of sealed to water. And then in terms of other media like watercolor, We may not choose to do a ground because we want to preserve the white spaces, but you will want to consider your background and work from background to foreground in that medium as well. So I've painted the ground, I've let it dry. I'm now looking at my reference image carefully, and I'm using a dark value color. I'm just using blue, the warm blue in my paint set. And I am going to start kind of drawing out my composition, so where everything's going to be placed. And I can go back and fix this later. So as you can see here, if I kind of mess up, I just go over the line again. And I'm just going to map out the placement of all the elements. So I'm going to draw a line to differentiate where the pan is and also where the eggs are. So let's kind of speed up that process. All right, now I'm going to start to block in some of the values. So I'm going to work from background to foreground, and I'm going to work from the darkest values to the lightest values. I'm also trying to use the complementary color scheme of purple and yellow. So all of the dark values that you're going to see me adding are going to be like a very dark purple. So what I'm using in this part right now is I've used ultramarine blue and crimson red, and it's going to create this kind of cool dark purple. I'm going to then use my reference image and figure out where all of the spaces that are the darkest value are, and I'm going to block that in. I have noticed that on this type of wood board, my paints are not as opaque as I would hope. So I'm doing this very loosely with the knowledge that I'm likely going to be painting over this or painting over part of this later on. And now I have all of the dark values added, so I'm going to mix a next darkest value by adding a little bit more red. You can see me adding a little bit more red right now. And I'm going to block that in where we have the mid values. And then finally I have a third light value that I'm going to mix by adding even more red. And so now I'm getting into more of a magenta type color. And I'm going to add this into all of the lighter areas where the light is reflecting off the cast iron pan. And again, doing so quite loosely because I'm going to probably be covering this up later. This is going to be kind of like a base for more detailed painting later on. So I've done the background area with the pan, and now I'm going to start by doing the same process. So I'm going to use a dark, medium, and a light value for the eggs. And so I'm noticing that the one on the right side is in shadows, so it's much darker. And so I've mixed a white where I've added some of the darker purple that I mixed earlier and a teeny tiny bit of black. And I'm just going to block in this value. And then I'm going to do something similar to the other side. I'm going to mix just a slightly lighter value and paint that whole area. So I'm just, again, this is very loose and this represents my mid value. And you guessed it, now we're doing the same thing with the yellow. And so I'm mixing a dark and then a mid value of yellow, and I'm just going to fill in the yolk section with these colors. So rather than adding black to my yellow or blue, which would cause it to be a little bit green, which I feel like would look weird, I'm adding mostly red and then a tiny bit of blue to sort of desaturate it a little bit. And this is going to be my dark yellow value. This marks the end of painting session number 1. So about 45 minutes has passed. And now you could see me starting here. I realized that the circle for the pan was quite off. So I decided to kind of fix that a bit with that white paint that you see here. And now I'm getting ready to create some more details and build up the opacity in the back where the pan is, because as you can see, it's dried quite transparently. So from this point on, all I'm doing is just repeating the process of mixing a dark value, blocking it in the sections that should be the dark values, then mixing a slightly lighter value, blocking that in, and then so on and so on. And later on, as I get more things blocked in, I'm going to want to start blending them a little bit more. But for now, I'm just continuing to block those dark values in the background where the pan is. And I've again mixed kind of a dark, cool purple for this purpose. So the dark values of the pan are finished. I'm now mixed slightly more red, purple, and I'm going to block that in. And now I'm getting to the point where my paint is still wet, where I've put the dark value. And so I'm going to hope to kind of blend these two values or these two colors together a little bit in certain spots. And now we see the mixing of the lightest value in the pan and just kind of adding that in. And there we see the blending technique. So just kind of taking the brush and swiping it back and forth between the two sections of paint. And we just want to make sure that there's enough paint and it's wet enough for the two colors to kind of blend together. So in this section, I'm adding kind of a lighter pink to my lightest value of purple, and it's making a very magenta color. And for the most part, for this whole painting, I've mostly used just the primary colors plus black and white. I suggest this for acrylic painting because I feel like it's less confusing. Oh, there you can see I'm doing some blending, swiping back and forth. Anyway, so I find that it's easier to just have the three primaries to work with, but sometimes I'll add in another pre-mixed color like a magenta, and I'm going to use purple pre-mixed as well in this painting. But I like to start out with those primaries just as my basis. So now moving on to the eggs. It doesn't mean that I'm done the background. It just means that for now I'm completing a cycle of background to foreground, and I'm kind of just moving through into the foreground now. And so what I'm doing is I've mixed a kind of a gray, purplish gray color. It's purple with white and some yellow to create that gray. And I am just blocking in the darker values where I see them on the egg in the reference image. So this is where there's all these little bubbles and stuff. These are the areas where I'm going to block in with gray. And now I want to blend these. So I'm washing my brush and making it clean but still wet. And I'm just swooshing the brush over top of those areas and gonna blend them in slightly more to the background color. And now typically I would just continue on with the next value, but I wanted to go in with a smaller brush and add some of those tiny details and their darker values that I can see along the edges of the egg. They're kind of like the burned crispy bits. And so I wanted to add those in just because I am going from dark value to light value. I saw there was a darker value to add in. Just a note too about brush size. So I try to use a large brush up until pretty much the very end, so that it kind of helps me to be sparse with my brush strokes. Like I can just dab the brush on there one time and create like a and create one of those bubbles on the egg, right? So it gives me a little bit of chances to be more economic with the brush strokes because I do really like that look in my paintings. So I typically will wait until I have all of the values kind of blocked in, and then I switch to the smaller, more detail brush. So again, I am now mixing a mid value and placing that on the painting wherever I see that mid value in the eggs. And this is creating a look that is kind of abstract. It's not quite realistic, but I'm just going to keep working because I know that later when I do some of those smaller details, when I do some more blending, I might even glaze over top of these details. Like that just means doing kind of a thin layer of paint on top of them, that it's going to look better. So part of being a mature creative, that's what we're building our skills towards, right? That we know that if something isn't going how we hope, right? If the painting is not looking how we're hoping right now, we know that we're confident in our abilities that we can get it to the point that we want it to be. It might take a little while, but we know that it'll get there. So continue working, take steps back, take breaks, but the process, trust the process. So now we have switched to the small brush and we are adding tiny highlights to the white areas of the egg. And I am just trying my best to look very carefully at my reference photo. One thing that might help is if you have your reference photo on a device to zoom right in to the section that you're working on. It makes it a lot easier to see where you need to place what values. I've skipped ahead quite a bit. I've done all the little details in the white highlights, and now I'm doing the same process with the egg. So I'm kind of just adding some mid and light highlights to the yolk. And yeah, that's what you're going to see me do right now. So now it is time for background round 3, and I'm just going to continue to work through. There's just some things I'm not liking about the background, so I'm going to make it a little bit more. I don't know. I'm just gonna work through it a little bit more. I might try to figure out how to add some more of the yellow into the background. And I am also trying to figure out how to do that texture in the cast iron, how it has sort of like this speckled look. Because I do really like the way that the pan looks very smooth in my painting, but that's not what it was looking like in the reference image. So just going to continue to work through the background, moving in from the mid to the light values at this point. So now I am going to do a kind of a cool technique where I'm using something you can see on my palette there called glazing medium. So it's kind of like acrylic paint with no pigment. It's just clear acrylic paint. And I'm mixing it with purple paint. And then I'm going to use that to paint over top of this white area. And it's kind of like watercolor. It's like the glazing technique in watercolor. So I'm able to add this sort of sheen or this film of purple over top. So I can add some purple tones into the shadows in the egg. But also still see all of the details and shading that I've done underneath. And I'm thinking of doing this on top of the left side of the egg because I just think the highlights and shadows are just a little too different from each other. So they need to be like toned back a little bit. So I might do this similar technique but with white paint and the glazing medium. If you don't have glazing medium at home, you can try this with water. But maybe try it out on a piece of paper first just to see what it's going to do. And then I hadn't addressed these corners yet, and they were just painted with the ground color, right? So I want to cover them with something. And I thought it would be nice to use yellow to make sure that the yellow is given enough sort of attention, I guess, in this color scheme. And so I'm just covering up the background and painting it yellow. And this is what I was left with. And of course, I added the hot sauce splotches as well. And I just worked the background over a little bit more to add a little bit of more bright purple because I felt like the dark purple in the background is so extremely dark. So that's my piece that I decided to stop working it for now. And then I have an image here of my paint palette just because I thought it would be fun to see all the different colors that I mixed. And that is it. I am really excited to see your color theory composition. Thanks for watching.